Daphne Caruana Galizia,
Maltese journalist, car bomb explosion, and a bomb was killed when she was driving.
Malta, October 16, 2017. Daphne Caruana Galizia gets into her car. Malta's most prominent journalist makes it just 200 meters down the road before a bomb blows her car apart. She dies at 2:58 p.m.
I heard about the murder when Daphne's son, Matthew, called me and said, you have to come, there was a bomb in Mommy's car. So, you don't have time to think. I just picked up my keys and drove to the house. And then, from there has not been a moment's peace.
I kept receiving calls from a number I didn't recognize and rejecting those calls because I didn't recognize the number. I then messaged my mother asking her whether she recognized the number. Of course, there was no reply because by that point she had been killed.
Police and emergency services encounter a horrible scene. Help arrived too late for Daphne Caruana Galizia. The murder of the famous investigative journalist shocked Europe and the world.
It's clear that my mother was murdered because she could be murdered. And there was an impression in Maltese society that enough people wanted her to be murdered. Enough people in positions of power had an interest in her being silenced.
For over 3 decades, Daphne Caruana Galizia fought against corruption and organized crime, reaching into Malta's highest circles. Her blog had more readers than the island has inhabitants. Political magazine called Galizia a one-woman WikiLeaks. Malta has been part of the European Union since May 2004. The brutal murder not only affects Malta, but it's an attack on the freedom of the press in the EU. The incapability or unwillingness of the authorities in Malta to investigate the people behind the assassination forced the Council of Europe in Strasbourg to act. Since April 2018, Peter Omtzig is investigating the case as special rapporteur.
It's only the 3rd time that a rapporteur is looking into a specific case, and the other 2 cases are in Russia. Yes, it is very worrying that this happens to an EU country.
When a journalist who reports on government corruption is assassinated, when the suspected killers are not put on trial, and the masterminds are not identified, when allegations of corruption in the entourage of powerful prime ministers go unchecked, then something is going badly wrong.
This is a very important case, if not the most important case on safety of journalists in Europe. What will happen with this case, it will determine also what happens in other countries.
I will do my best to be brief.
Owen Benici, Malta's Minister of Justice, points to the judiciary.
What I can say is that in less than 100 days, we had arraigned to court 3 Maltese nationals accused with the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia. And we also kept investigating, the authorities kept investigating, in order to find the mastermind.
Maltese security forces, in fact, do arrest 3 suspects in December 2017, 2.5 months after the murder. Vincent Muscat, George DiGiorgio, and his brother Alfred. They were charged with the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia. However, not one of the men had a motive. A divisionary tactic?
In fact, we still do not know who ordered her killing. The situation is as she left it. desperate, starting with the investigations of her own murder, which I feel were tainted.
Malta, vacation paradise, dream destination for language students from all over the world. A small state that is controlled by two political parties, with a deeply divided population in the middle. Almost none of the tourists know that here, of all places, organized crime and mob structures thrive. The 300 souls strong community of Bidnia in the north of the island. This is where the journalist lived until her death. Her son Matthew stayed on, managing his mother's estate.
So my mom, for a long time, she kept like cuttings of most of her articles in these box files. Here she's writing about new radio stations that were being launched by the political parties. I mean, this is when she starts becoming concerned about propaganda in the country. This is a story, I really like this one. A lot of children, they were arriving by boat from Albania as refugees. Later on, she wrote about people who came from sub-Saharan Africa and crossed from North Africa to Malta by boat. And as a result of that writing, a group of neo-Nazis set our house on fire.
When I was about 16, the first arson attack on the house happened. And people were able to come up to the house and lay all those car tires and bottles of petrol because there was no boundary wall. And in fact, they came from the back of the house, from the valley, in the middle of the night, carried all those things up, dumped them by the side of the house and ran away back.
Everyone was very worried for our safety, for my mother's safety. My mother pulled us out of school for 2 weeks. Obviously, we still had to do work. We still had to write our sort of essays for school and do our homework and whatever. But we were just swimming in the sea every day. I mean, it was sort of an adventure for us. So even though my mother was working on this really dangerous stuff, she managed to create this sort of normal environment for us.
London. Paul Caruana Galizia has been living here for many years.
It's good to remember what motivated her, and that has been a consistent thread through her reporting ever since she was 20 or 21 years old. And she was motivated by the sense of injustice, whatever it was.
At the same time, there were no men in the country who were in fact writing about the same things, which left my mother even more isolated and even more of a target. Emmanuel Kouchgeri, he's a propagandist for the governing party in general. I think he still has a radio show, and this entire radio show was dedicated to attacking my mother.
I never realized that the house was attacked, she was attacked, all the abuse she received in person and online. And suddenly we started, in a kind of really dispassionate way, just collecting all these incidents and realized this is just horrifying. And I can't believe that no one stepped in. I can't believe that we normalized all this violence.
Galicia is attacked on social media, like Facebook, with crude hate speech. But Malta's justice minister is evasive.
In our political sphere, it's part of the political discourse, to criticize and be criticized. So on the part of the Labour Party. There were people who absolutely disagreed with her style of writing and criticized her style of writing, but I would not agree with the word attacked.
The style changed, it became harsher, it became cruel at times, and dark, sometimes so dark that you just couldn't read it. And I think the reason for that was that because the abuse that she was getting. Obviously, she was no saint. I think she would laugh at us if we try to portray her into a saint.
I myself, as opposition leader, was not always on the right side of her writings, but that's how it should be. I'm in politics, she criticizes politicians, so this is something I can live with. But I suppose not many people were happy to live with that. And at the end, she paid the ultimate price.
On November 3, 2017, the memorial service for Daphne Caruana Galizia takes place in Mostar. Hundreds of people stream into the Catholic Church to pay their respects to the journalist. Afterwards, her body is put to rest in the Bednia graveyard near her hometown. Galicia's supporters place some of the blame for her murder on the government. Protesters demand the resignation of Malta's chief of police, Lawrence Cotillard. For them, he is the face of impunity.
It's so easy to say that things will never change, that, countries have always been corrupt, that politicians have always been immoral. But my mother never believed that. And she used to reject those arguments. She'd say, as soon as you become cynical, you might as well stop existing because you have no effect on the world.
So I think somewhere around there. About there for the middle.
Once a month, always on the 16th, people remember Galizia in Malta's capital.
Since Daphne was killed, we've seen in front of the courts building that there is a protest memorial. First of all, I think we need to make the difference between a memorial and a protest memorial. A protest memorial is something temporary. It's something when you expect authorities to do something, in the case of Daphne, investigations, and then once that's done, the protest memorial would go away.
But the protest memorial for Daphne Caruana Galizia won't disappear. Month after month, people gather outside the court building in Valletta in remembrance of Galizia, demanding answers. One of them is Maltese actress Kiazand, who joined the activist movement Occupy Justice shortly after the murder.
Why do we every month come here and seemingly say the same things over and over again? At times, it seems futile. Most times, it seems futile. But I know, as well as all of you know, that we must be here every month, and we must speak, even if it is to repeat ourselves.
The parents of the murdered journalist take part as well.
It's a bit consoling, to once a month for people to remember. And people keep coming and putting more candles, more flowers. So in a way, it's provoking people, and they don't want her name to be here and these things written about her, and for tourists to come and see them. They send the government cleaners in the evening.
When you have the government authority that is every day clearing up Daphne's memorial, removing flowers and candles, there is clearly, to my mind there, an attempt to try and erase what happened from the collective memory.
People who want to show support for Daphne Caruana Galizia have all the right to do that. If they want to cover the monument from bottom to top with flowers, no one has stopped them. But after the event ends, these are cleaned in order to preserve as much as possible the aesthetic beauty of the monument.
Malta is a divided country, both politically and socially, and has been for decades. Columnist Rainer Sadny remembers unrest in the 1980s. There were many conflicts between the government and the opposition, as well as demonstrations and student protests that were put down violently by the police.
The 80s up until 1987 would have been a period of increasing political tension in Malta, which politicized ordinary families, including school children, because of the nature of the dispute. And there was a great sense of control. With this control and centralization also came wide scope for corruption.
Malta's biggest newspaper at the time, the Times of Malta, was burnt to the ground by supporters of the then government. She was herself arrested simply for being present at a protest, kept in custody for more than 24 hours. She was 19 years old at the time. I think that this kind of experience spurred her on to do something to change the situation.
And she became a columnist in 1990, 3 years after this government came into power. This was a Labour government that froze Malta's application to join the European Union. She was very much in favour of joining, and she considered this policy to be not just wrong, but even a threat to her 3 sons.
In 2004, Malta becomes an EU member state, reason to celebrate, especially for a corrupt elite smelling big business. The small Mediterranean island now has access to the European single market.
We were richer, but we were no more democratic. Checks on corruption were very primitive still, but the price of corruption grew dramatically. So suddenly, corrupt actors in Malta with access to a major European market. I think passports are a good example. What is the value or the price, actually, of a Maltese passport pre- and post-European membership? It's dramatically different.
The Malta Individual Investor Program is the most exclusive in the world. As citizens of Malta, successful applicants can enjoy visa-free access to approximately 180 destinations.
Galizia points to the scandal of passports for sale in her blog and towards the fact that Malta is becoming a gateway for money laundering and organized crime, but nothing changes.
This IIP, the Individual Investors Program, we actually do not sell the passports. There is a very strict due diligence process. This program has the main aim not of raising money for the government, but of attracting people who want to invest, who want to create jobs. If there were systematic failures, we would not have joined the EU 15 years ago.
The economy is booming. Unemployment is decreasing. At elections, the people reward the government with cushy majorities.
The problem is that the institutions in our country have been completely captured by the governing party and specifically by the Prime Minister.
There is no independent media when it comes to TV, which is where 80% of Maltese society gets its news. So you have the party in government owning a TV station, the opposition owning a TV station, and the state broadcaster owned or controlled by the party in government.
Daphne realized after she lost her job at the Sunday Times in the mid-90s that her voice could just be cut off. And she regarded her blog as her way to guarantee having her voice no matter what people said.
She used to keep us all informed. She was our main source of information for Malta. A lot of Maltese people used to follow this and follow it religiously. It's like saying a place like Germany would have someone being read by what, the population is what, 80 million or 90 million, being read by 40 million regularly, not once, not twice, but regularly. It's an impossible thing to envisage.
She was the only investigative journalist in Malta who was coming up with results. We knew what was happening from Daphne.
My mother was reporting a lot on the deal that the government was fixing with the electro-gas consortium, which involved Azerbaijan, Maltese business people who are associates of elected politicians, and Siemens too.
Galizia claims in her blog that the wife of Prime Minister Muscat owns an offshore company, E-Grant. She does not provide evidence before she dies, but she does for another, much bigger story. On February 22, 2016, Galizia writes a puzzling sentence. If the Panama hat fits, wear it. This may be the sentence that kills her in the end.
She didn't say anything about Panama Papers, but the first thing she did was, there was a picture of Conrad Mitzi, who was a minister then and still is, and she got him in her blog, just a picture of him with a hat, with a Panama hat. So it intrigued us, it sent us into sort of what the hell is happening. We were used to a lot of scandals, but to have a government minister and a chief of staff who had secret slush funds in Panama was unreal.
When the revelations came out, we were totally shocked, we were frightened, we were worried, and we felt powerless.
I don't have a clue how it happened, but she definitely broke the story.
With the Panama Papers, journalists uncover how an elite hid money worldwide using tax havens and dummy companies. Galizia takes on the Maltese offenders.
I think there are two sides of the story. The first side is a political consideration, so issues relating to whether ministers should be sacked from this position or otherwise is a political debate. Mr. Mitzi had resigned the deputy leadership of the Labour Party after this story was published, so there were political consequences for him.
Well, at the moment, it was one of the biggest scandals that rocked Malta and also various governments in the world.
All over the world, people protest corrupt dealings. On Malta, corruption has a history too.
Corruption didn't start with Labour. When we removed the Nationalist Party in 2013, those elements joined the Labour corruptive elements because Joseph Muscat wanted to keep them in. So it is the business oligarchs now that rule our country. It's not Joseph Muscat and his gang. The bad thing about this government is that it bows its head to the pressure of business interests.
One of the most powerful people in Malta right now is Keith Schembri, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. I mean, my mother found they had a secret Panama company. He was planning to receive kickbacks of hundreds of thousands of euros every year from several different deals. And he's still there, so he's still either the most or the second most powerful figure in Maltese politics.
When the Prime Minister's top minister is exposed as caught red-handed registering a similar company in Panama, then something must be clearly wrong.
Joseph Muscat, he has kept on defending and protecting the people whom everyone knows to be corrupt. My mother would still be alive if, after the publication of the Panama Papers, he would have fired these people.
Before she died, Galizia wrote about a company in Dubai, 17 Black, allegedly owned by the government. What did Keith Schembri know?
You know who owns the company? Are you afraid to answer the question?
I think it's very clear.
I'm asking you, and I'm asking Mr. Schembri who owns 17 Black.
Mr. Schembri said he's giving evidence in front of the inquiry, so I think that's enough of a comment, and thank you very much for it.
You're going to get 1 million from these draft business plans. It's pretty lucrative. So once again, who owns 17 Black?
Maybe I use them to pay your wages like I did over the past 3 years.
We thought things would happen, but obviously nothing did, except ultimately that they killed her. They killed the messenger herself, which is the shocking part of it all.
3 sons have lost their mother without anything changing in Malta until today. Was it worth the sacrifice?
If the question is, would we have asked her to stop had we realized all this was going on? I think not. I think, you know, you can respond to these things in 2 ways. You take the side of the oppressor and say stop, or you take the side of the oppressed and you say, this provides an even greater argument to continue the reporting.
The attempts to isolate Daphne and destroy her reputation and social existence were proving to be successful.
You know, by isolating a person, you sort of tap into this medieval imagery of the outcast, the person who is outside society, where there's, you know, little sympathy.
Turning her into this witch, which is what the word that was often used, and this sort of constant dripping, brainwashing seeped into the culture of Malta. So even if you go to the theatre, then you'd see Daphne personified as a witch on stage, and obviously I think this must have left an impact on her.
If you dehumanize the journalist, you sort of discredit them in advance, so that when they do come out with the results of their investigations, no one is going to believe them, because the reporter, the journalist, has already been completely dehumanized. No one is going to pay attention to their work.
The people who hated her didn't even know why they were hating her, because the Labour propaganda machine was telling them that she was an evil woman, a witch, someone who hated her country, who hated everyone. She was fat, she was ugly, she was hairy. They were dehumanizing her. The propaganda machine was dehumanizing her, turning her into something that people should avoid, should abhor, should, if they have the chance, destroy.
All that is wrong with this country right now is because of the maneuvers of a few people, not because of Maltese society. And it is extremely cruel that those people who are fighting for democracy and the rule of law in Malta keep being branded as traitors when these are the true heroes of the country.
Until October 16th, 2017, there were rarely protests against illegal schemes, against abuse of office, and against corruption. People quietly accepted the status quo. The murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia caused several young people to step forward who used to follow Galicia's blog intently, like Tina Urso and Estelle Spiteri.
There was no way of stopping Daphne other than using a car bomb. Who would want to murder a person for doing her job? The country has always been very divided between two big parties, so the Nationalist and the Labour Party. In terms of activism, we're not very used to being politically active because it's such a small country, everyone knows each other. So people don't feel very comfortable putting themselves out there because it's easy to feel targeted in one way or another.
This is from the first protest that we had organized. I think it was 16th of November, the first, exactly a month later. And we had asked everyone to bring bay leaves. And we bought all these gold and silver permanent markers, and people were writing different messages on them. Like this one has "Your voice lives on." And the bay leaf symbol was, because Daphne actually means bay leaves in Greek, and bay leaves symbolize victory. So it was such a powerful symbol. The day after the protest, I started receiving a lot of messages from people. Noticed they were coming from these pro-government groups on Facebook, where there are about 50,000 people. I received hundreds of messages, threats. My family's home address was sort of put out on social media, my ID card. I was more shocked at how people didn't learn. Like, after what happened just a few months earlier to a woman and what a hate campaign, a 30-year-long hate campaign can lead to.
The last conversation we had was actually in October 2017, in the month when she was killed. She would write to me out of the blue. Sent me a message. "Caroline, we need to meet." She had been in danger for 30 years. At what point do you know that a particular threat is serious? But I got a sense from her, with hindsight, that she had a sense something was wrong. Certain things that she said, for example, in one of her last messages that I have a sense of things, of time running out. There are so many things that I wanted to do.
Caroline Muscat had to experience her friend paying for her courage with her life. But she is not intimidated. After Galicia's murder, she wanted to continue her friend's work and founded the independent news site, The Shift News. The goal? Uncover corruption. The consequence? Attacks like the ones on Galizia.
There are journalists in Malta who are at great risk, and Caroline Muscat is one of them. A few weeks after my mother was killed, a lot of images started circulating on social media calling for Caroline to be killed. People saying one witch down, another one to go.
These pro-government platforms and groups continue sharing my photos, saying things like I deserve a few more bombs, like Daphne Caruana Galizia got. Some of them have ghosts revolving around my face.
They would discourage other people, especially women, from doing the same thing. So my mother said in the last interview she did 6 days before her assassination that they had turned her from a positive role model into a negative role model. Now, more or less, Caroline Muscat, she's being subjected to the same intimidation and harassment that my mother was subjected to.
My friend was killed. There is no way I'm going to let that go. Should I be in Malta? Would I prefer in my life that I'm doing something else? Of course. If Maltese society wants to elect a government that is going to continue to abuse its right, it's its right to do that. But it's also my right to fight for justice, for a journalist killed. And until that justice is achieved, I will not leave Malta, no matter what she said.
So far, everything stays the same on Malta. People are celebrating their festivals in the narrow alleys of the capital. A familial atmosphere, which is part of the problem, according to Jonathan Ferris. He used to be a corruption investigator and was fired for asking too many questions.
How corrupt is the island? I can tell you, look at the size of the island, where everyone knows each other, or practically, to a certain extent, one is related to another. Do you think that you can turn a blind eye on a friend who helped you maybe rise to a level where you are now? No. Can you turn a blind eye on a relative? Very difficult. So how corrupt is the island?
Lizzie Eldridge is one of the activists placing candles at the memorial and criticizing the government on posters. Today, the finance minister. Many Maltese don't appreciate that at all.
Is there any proof about that? Is there any proof about that?
Yes.
No, there are only allegations. It's not proof that he is guilty.
It needs to be proved in court, as I've said.
Everybody can be investigated, but it has to be proved.
That's what the court is there for.
What she said is not an evidence. What she did...
This is not about what she said.
Yeah, that's about what she
exposed
said.
them. She
It's
exposed
about
them
what she said.
because she originally exposed vitals.
It's
That's
written
what they're
there.
in
It's
court
about
for.
what she said.
did expose them, yes.
I don't like what they're doing here. This is the memorial for the people who died in the Second World War and in the Great Siege. And my father, if you don't know it, he died before I was born in the war. He was a soldier. She can have a monument wherever they want.
It's not a monument.
But not here. But not here. This is not the right place.
Sorry, it's not a monument, it's a protest. In every country, monuments are used as a form of protest. It's only in Malta that they're cleared night after night after night, in every country.
The Maltese continue to hope for justice. Without justice, there can be no reconciliation.
If you ask me about the future, it's like opening a Pandora's box. I am pretty sure that the moment one of the criminals falls, and I'd say he opens up, it's going to be, you know, like fireworks in the sky.
They have removed the only thing that was between them and the total collapse of rule of law. And that is what we are experiencing now.
It was such a huge and horrible and visible way. You know, she was killed outside her home, in broad daylight, in an explosion that was not meant to look like an accident. That's a spectacular show of impunity.
The Council of Europe cannot and will not accept this direct attack against freedom of the press in Europe. In a resolution, it makes numerous demands on the Maltese government. Galicia's sons campaign for the resolution to pass in the Council of Europe.
I always come into these events sort of emotionally very well prepared, but it becomes very difficult to separate my role as the son of my mother and my role now as a witness to what happened. When my brothers and I first spoke in this building just over a year ago, fortunately a lot of people believed us. They managed to understand the situation, despite the fact that there was no real independent research on the situation in Malta. Speaking here today, the situation is completely different. There's still no justice for my mother, but now it is beyond doubt that there are serious rule of law failings in Malta. There's a serious corruption problem in Malta.
Thank you,
The Council of Europe controls adherence to human rights in Europe and safeguards freedom of the press. The murder of Galizia is an issue of major concern for the Council. During a hearing, Malta's Minister of Justice Bonici defends his government.
Now, Dr. Owen Bonici.
Honourable members, in the first place, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to have this exchange of views and to engage in genuine dialogue about Malta's state of play regarding its legal system and recent and upcoming reforms to further strengthen the rule of law. It should be noted from the outset that since the election of the present government in 2013, we have implemented a series of robust reforms. We are a reformist government.
If I could have asked him a question, for example, I would have wanted to know whether he feels any kind of responsibility for my mother's death because he failed to prosecute any of the people that she reported on.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I welcome you to this side meeting? This meeting is to inform you of the current situation, and I'm delighted to see you all here.
It is a major issue in Malta. People are following it in Malta. They're getting updates regularly. But it is definitely a big story today in Malta. Even the major independent newspapers have had stories talking about creating the expectation for this report. So in Malta at the moment, all eyes are on Strasbourg.
I hope that the draft resolution will be adopted. I hope that there will not be votes against the provisions of that report. And I hope that at the end we can say the Council of Europe supports the call for a public inquiry. It's not a process, neither the magisterial inquiry nor the police investigation can investigate the circumstances of Daphne's death. They are not investigating whether the state knew or could have known of the murder in advance, or should have known and done something to prevent it. Nobody's examining the Maltese state. That can only be done by a public inquiry. And that is one of the provisions of the resolution being proposed for a vote today.
That's what the Council of Europe is here for, when a country has serious problems with the rule of law or with democracy. And in this case, it is with the rule of law. And we also think that the parliament in Malta isn't strong enough. It's also necessary under the European Convention on Human Rights, because one of the essences is to protect human life, Article 2.
Keep four things in mind if you look at these scandals. First, the basic facts. Secret offshore companies, bank account, contracts, agreements, connections, and so on are not contested. Second, none of them have been properly investigated. Third, Mrs. Chambry is still the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Mr. Mizzi is still a government minister, and Prime Minister Muscat refuses to even consider dismissing them. Fourth, Daphne Caruana Galizia led the reporting on most of these scandals. No one thinks that the three suspects had their own motives for killing her. She never wrote about them. Everyone agrees that someone else commissioned the assassination. I call on you to support the draft resolution presented by the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. Thank you.
I support Peter's report wholeheartedly, but I also will argue that we need an independent public inquiry. I'm sorry to say this to my friends from Malta, to get at all the circumstances surrounding it. And contrary to what you heard from my friends from Malta, this can proceed in parallel. This public inquiry should be carried out straight away, and that we should see some justice for this very brave family.
Nous allons maintenant procéder au vote sur le projet de résolution contenu dans le document 14 906 amendé. Le scrutin est ouvert. La résolution est adoptée par 72 voix contre 18 et 3 abstentions. Merci. Mes chers et chers collègues, je vais vous donner maintenant les résultats des différents scrutins.
I really hope that we hereby enter a new era in which the ball is now in the court of Malta to start changing something, and they know that the rest of Europe is watching.
The EU's mandate to Malta's government is clear, but the Minister of Justice once again objects.
A public inquiry might risk prejudicing ongoing criminal investigations and criminal processes. So we're saying it's not an issue of when, it's not an issue of if, but when. So we are in agreement of holding a public inquiry, but it would make sense to hold the public inquiry after the pending criminal proceedings are over. However, we are aware that the Council of Europe has spoken, and we respect the Council of Europe.
To this day, Daphne's family is still waiting for political and public pressure to lead to the resolution of the murder. Just as Daphne always hoped that an alert, critical public could change conditions in the country.
Her interest was making things better. Her husband said in a speech he gave when the press room in Strasbourg was dedicated to her, he said, you know, the uglier the world outside grew, the more beautiful our garden grew. It's almost as though she wanted to create a beautiful environment to compensate for what was happening outside. And the garden is still there, which is nice to know. The trees she planted, they're all growing. Yeah. It is a lovely place. It's one of the last places we met was in her garden. It's just a few days before she was killed.
I love gardens, mysterious, magical gardens full of nooks and crannies. The equivalent of rambling old houses packed with rackety furniture and old curios brought back by antecedents from their peregrinations. Gardens that are collections of plants of all kinds, tall and small, wild and tame, big-leafed and spiked, tangle-branched and swooping. The hard wiring for this pattern in my preference was probably, I now realize, set by the time I was in primary school and my imagination captured by the book The Secret Garden.
I miss Malta now more than ever because there's this sense that it's slipping away even faster, because I always had in my mind that there would be some point when I would go back to Malta. And instead of becoming easier, it's become a more distant prospect.
I remember telling someone once, like, even if I were to die really young, I would sort of be satisfied, because growing up with my mother, I had such an incredibly, like, rich, varied life.
I don't know if I'll be able to tell my own daughter about her grandmother, or whether I'll rely on other people to do it. But maybe one day I'll be able to to tell the story in a form which she can understand and which would be easy for me as well.
2 years after the crime, the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia still has not been solved. 3 men were charged, but nobody knows who was behind it and who ordered the hit. The doubts about the investigators' independence and willingness to solve the case have only grown during this time.
Well, the Council of Europe wants a better Europe. So, to have a better Europe, we have to have a better Malta. We have to have a Malta which does not allow criminality to insidiously creep further and deeper into Europe.
The situation remains as dangerous as it was a year and a half ago. We are no safer, we are no further. We've still ensured that any journalist reporting on this kind of crime is at risk of extremely violent death.
They're not going to get away with it. We're going to make sure that I'm going to get away with it. I have no hope. I have a determination. It's different. I was born, bred, lived in this country. I've also lived in other countries. I fought governments that have insisted on injustices in their own countries, and I have fought for people in those countries to ensure they achieve justice. I will certainly be doing this for Daphne Caruana Galizia.
After filming had concluded, events in Malta began to rapidly unfold. On November 20th, the owner of 17 Black, which Galizia reported on, is arrested. The man has close ties to the government. His arrest sends shockwaves through the establishment. Following several resignations, the fate of Malta's government remains uncertain. Will there finally be justice for Daphne Caruana Galizia?